Well, so Blinken made his trip to China, and there was a whole thing last year of how he was scheduled to go to China, but that didn't happen because of the spy balloon.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried to cover up. The U.S. tried to cover up that there was a spy balloon because they didn't want it to interfere with the trip. But then stupid Americans with their cell phones had an opinion that the government didn't want. And
Well, I thought you were going to say stupid Americans with their cell phones filmed the spy balloon.
yeah, and then developed the opinions that the government didn't want.
Mm-hmm.
The American people really are not doing what the government wants. Get on that, American people.
I actually think that's pretty much the beauty of the American people.
You're a foreigner, Shelley, aren't you?
No, Chris, I am actually an American.
God bless America. But so after a whole bunch of kowtowing, literally in the case of Janet Yellen, the U.S. and Chinese officials are finally talking again. And so Blinken made another trip to China just this past week. And the crazy thing is, it's like just this. He's like a hamster in a wheel, just spinning around and around and around. They're talking. The things that they said that he talked to the other officials about are the same things that U.S. officials have always been talking.
But see,
about.
Chris, it's much more powerful to talk about them in person.
Yes, now they can lie directly to your face.
Yeah, as opposed to just lying over like a teleconference. I think we all learned from Zoom during the pandemic that that's not the ideal way to have meetings.
Right, because what if you're in an important Zoom meeting with a Chinese leader and then he realizes you're not wearing pants?
Did Blinken wear pants in person? I just don't get Blinken. I don't understand how he functions.
Yeah, I do, because, okay, so Blinken's the Secretary of State, right? And the State Department's job is diplomacy, which is, as they currently see it, is to have conversations with people. So while you see a hamster wheel, and I also see the hamster wheel, for Blinken, that spinning wheel is the whole world, right? That's the State Department's job. He's doing his job by having these diplomatic conversations.
Well, how does that explain why he wore
spinning
pants?
Wheel, the hamster spinning wheel is powering peace in our time.
No, it's powering further dialogue.
Uh-huh. Okay, so as long as we just keep talking for the sake of
talking.
I
get what Matt's saying. It's like in California, the people in charge of solving the homelessness crisis, their jobs is to perpetually solve this problem, so it never gets solved. And the State Department's job is diplomacy, so they must have diplomacy.
But I feel like that's
stupid.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a tautology. So it's like you could be like every job needs to continue to have that job. I mean, I don't think
it's the wrong way of looking at whatever department you run in the cabinet or any other major government position, right? Which is that when you are the head of a department, State Department in Antony Blinken's case, you see your job as to run that department, but it's easy to be blind to the larger strategic objectives of the administration, even though in theory you're meeting with the president all the time. But I'm not clear that what's happening is that the president is able to give a unified strategic direction to each of the cabinet positions, whether it's Treasury with Yellen or State with Blinken or defense or any of these things. I feel like there's not really a cohesion, and so what's happening is that each of these departments is kind of doing its own thing as best it can, but they're all in kind of hamster wheels because they're just not. They're not giving this bigger picture. I don't know if that's
the problem. I don't know if that's the problem actually.
Well, the reason I say that, and I don't know what's happening, in the White House, but I'm not seeing this larger strategic direction for the United States.
So what do you think is going on, Shell?
Well, I'm going to say that even under the Trump administration's tough on China policies, right? That was supposedly the overarching thing, is that we were going to change the way we look at China as a strategic adversary, not just a competitor. And so there was some cohesion there. But then you still had, for example, Treasury trying to undermine things. Do you know what I mean? So you still have, I don't think it's just that there's no cohesion. I think that you will have individual departments or people arguing for what things from their perspective. So you always have the people who are more sympathetic to Wall Street trying to gain influence, or more sympathetic, do you know what I mean? So I think it's not just that there's no cohesion. I think that there is a cohesive Biden policy towards China, or Biden administration policy towards China.
And how would you summarize that?
Going back to the strategic competitor, like they still want to keep some of the tougher economic things that Trump put in place, like the tariffs, but at the same time, they, I think, have a philosophical difference about what it means to, what deterrence means, or what it means to
They
try to
don't talk about the
avoid
Marxist
war.
Leninists.
So,
Yeah,
so what you're saying is they've got one foot on the train and the other on the platform.
kind of. I think. I think that it is now no longer possible to go completely back to the engagement model of the 90s. But there are
Right.
obviously people within the Biden administration who would like to do that.
Because they've been
And-
around since that era.
Well, we know that Blinken does not agree with Biden. Like, if we go back to that time, that wonderful moment, whoever that photog was who put the camera on Blinken, where Biden is being asked, like, do you still think Xi Jinping is a dictator? And it's like, yeah, of course he's a dictator.
And Blinken
But
just
it's
has
like a-
It's
this.
just
It's
like,
like-
he dies.
And
he wouldn't
he
have that opinion.
visibly winced. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think from his perspective, he's thinking that, oh, now my job's much harder or whatever. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I don't.
Well, but what is his job, right? And I think he has a different view of his job than what I think his job ought to be.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you think his job ought to be?
His job ought to be to make sure that America upholds American values with respect to foreign countries.
That is definitely. I don't think anybody in the State Department would say that is the State Department's job.
Yeah, but the thing is, if we don't over the long term, over the course of decades or centuries, sort of have this strong American values and whatever you define that as, then over the long term, we will not achieve our larger objectives, and countries will lose respect for us for constantly, doing things that are stupid, right? Like all these things that we did in terms of working with China, in the late 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s, we looking back, it's like, oh well, that was stupid.
Well, okay,
Right? Because
but that's
we didn't try to uphold American values of liberty, for example. And you look at China and their horrible human rights abuses. America never tried to stand up for that, right? And had we done that from the get-go after Tiananmen and just kept on that pressure continuously, I think the U.S. would be stronger. And it would be stronger for a number of reasons, and not just with respect to diplomacy with China, but we wouldn't have shipped all those jobs to China, and we'd have stronger manufacturing in the United States. We'd have higher wages as a result, which spills over into all these aspects of the U.S. economy, which manifests as strength internationally with respect to every country, more stability in the currency, and all these things, right? And it's because, why did we lose all this? Because we dropped our American values for the false promise of having Wall Street make a little money in China.
Have you ever considered going into politics?
I would hate to be a politician.
But you get to tell people what to do. That's how American democracy works, right? Somebody just tells everyone what to do.
You vote for me, and I tell you what to do. And ideally, I run in a safe district that's either all blue or all red, and so I can keep my position for as long as I want and not have to serve my constituents at all. Oh
Pretty
man,
sweet
that
gig.
sounds like a great
Plus
deal.
all the insider trading you get to do.
Oh yeah.
so basically you want to be in Congress. You don't want to be in the executive.
Yeah. Because Congress, you're not expected to do anything.
Amen.
Well, I kind of almost forgot what we were talking about before.
was talking about-
Lincoln.
yeah.
No, I was talking about the America's need to uphold American values with respect to China policy, and that us not doing that over the last few decades has led to this horrible situation. And the State Department is not really considering this, just considering how to have good relations.